Japan has a reputation for being one of the safest countries in the world, with remarkably low violent crime rates. But even in this seemingly orderly society, dark stories lurk beneath the surface. On this channel, we explore true crime cases and other strange, bizarre mysteries. If that piques your interest, consider liking and subscribing. Now, without further ado, let's lift the thin veil. In today's world, social media connects us in ways that were unimaginable just a few decades ago. Platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter, allow us to share our thoughts, moments, and lives instantly with a global audience. However, while social media can be a powerful tool for connection and communication, it can also reveal the darker side of human nature. Sometimes, it becomes a stage for unsettling incidents. And sometimes, you just don't know who you're really talking to. On October the 31st, 2017, Japanese police were on the search for a missing girl and entered an apartment 30 miles southwest of Tokyo. What they were greeted with would leave some of them traumatized for life. When they walked in and met the apartment's tenant, 27-year-old Takahiro Shiraishi, he pointed to a freezer behind him and said, "In there." The freezer Takahiro was pointing to contained dismembered parts from several bodies, including the missing girl the police were searching for. Several bodies were found stuffed inside, and more in cold storage boxes nearby, and in the bathroom of the apartment were the tools, like a saw, ropes, and an awl, apparently used to restrain and cut the bodies. Takahiro Shiraishi was a scout for an escort service in Tokyo's red light district. He was already known on social media for disturbing posts and stalking women. One person employed in the same business as Takahiro posted a photo of him with the caption that read, "Watch out for this scout." Other locals would make posts warning their followers about the creepy guy in the area. Most who knew Takahiro personally described him as someone who didn't stand out and was mostly quiet. An ex-girlfriend said he was always gentle and never angry with women, but had a morbid fascination with death. She claimed he had once sent her a message about wanting to end their lives together, and another message which said that he had killed a female bartender. She thought he was just joking. Another childhood friend said that although Takahiro was someone that blended in with everyone else, there was one thing that stood out about him. As children, most of us play games to pass time. A lot of us grew up playing tag, hide and seek, and hopscotch. But Takahiro was different. He had one game where he used to choke his friends and not stop until his friend would faint or pass out. When Takahiro left his job as a promoter for the escort club, he also fell out with his father. He eventually left the bustling city of Tokyo and moved into the one-bedroom apartment in Zama, and it is believed that his loss of relationship with his only family member affected him greatly. Upon his last meeting with his father, he told him that his life had no meaning. Moving to his new apartment in August 2017 is where his mind would also delve into depravity. Takahiro started to describe himself as a professional hangman on his Twitter profiles, which he had about 4 of. On each one of these profiles, Takahiro had some sort of description or message to indicate he wants to take his own life and help anyone else wishing to do the same. He first started messaging people who wanted to take their own lives and requested to come over to assist them or just sit and watch, but this was only the beginning for him. Takahiro soon started making some very disturbing posts. His accounts have since been taken down, but one of his posts read, "I want to spread my knowledge in hanging. I really want to become the source of strength for everyone who is in pain." After building a small following online with the hashtag recruitment used in most of his posts, Takahiro started contacting vulnerable girls aged between 15 and 26. He would arrange to meet them at a train station near their homes, then travel together to his apartment. To reassure the girls and women, Takahiro would claim he would take his own life with them. Upon arriving at his home, he'd give them alcohol, sleeping pills, and tranquilizers before he would SA them, followed by him taking their life, usually through strangulation. He would then take the cadavers to the bathroom, where he would dismember their bodies before placing parts around his house, covering them in cat litter and disposing of some in the building's garbage disposal. Takahiro claimed a total of 9 lives between August and October 2017. 8 of them were women, and 1 was a man who was a boyfriend of one of the female victims. The boyfriend contacted Takahiro and asked if he knew where his missing girlfriend was. Takahiro lured him to the apartment under a false pretense and then took his life. But it was the death of his final victim, given the moniker Yumi by the police, that had led police straight to Takahiro's house of horrors. Days after she went missing, Yumi's brother hacked into her Twitter account and found a number of messages that she had exchanged with Takahiro. With this information, the police set up a trap with a woman who'd met Takahiro before and agreed to be a lure. It was here, on Halloween night 2017, that police would walk into the disturbing crime scene. In 3 cooler boxes and 5 large storage boxes, along with a freezer, police found heads, legs, and arms from his victims. Takahiro was known to the police as he had been arrested earlier that year and given a suspended jail sentence for trying to recruit an underage girl for an adult club. During his police interview, when trying to establish motive, Takahiro claimed he wanted to force himself upon his victims. In their vulnerable states, he wanted to manipulate and SA them, fulfilling his fantasies and not having to worry about them denying his advances. It's worth noting that stolen money was also found in Takahiro's apartment. Confessing to the crimes immediately, he also told the police, "It was difficult at first. It took me 3 days to get rid of the first body, but after that, I could deal with them within 1 day." On October the 1st, 2020, Takahiro pleaded guilty to 9 murders, and on December the 15th, 2020, he was sentenced to death. He is currently awaiting execution. Disability care homes play a crucial role in providing support, dignity, and a sense of community to individuals who may face challenges in their day-to-day lives. These homes are designed to offer specialized care, helping residents live as independently as possible while receiving the assistance they need. For many, these facilities are a place of safety and comfort, where compassionate staff provide not just medical care, but also emotional and social support. Sukui Lily Garden in the city of Sagamihara was one such place that would see its darkest day in July 2016. This facility served as a care home for people with a diverse set of disabilities, some with physical, but all with mental disabilities. Established by the local government, the facility housed 149 residents between the ages of 19 and 75. Some residents were able to do physical activities outdoors, while others were bedridden. Whilst most employees who get into caring for the disabled or vulnerable do so with the best of intentions, in this care home, there was one ex-employee whose hateful and violent actions were responsible for a mass tragedy. Satoshi Uematsu, a 26-year-old who worked as a caretaker at Sukui. Although he seemed to have a bright future there initially, over the years, he started hitting and swearing at some of the patients in the care home. After warnings from his employer, he decided it was best if he resigned. Unfortunately, this wasn't the last time Sukui would see of Satoshi. At about 2 in the morning on July the 26th, 2016, Satoshi broke into the care home, armed with a sashimi knife and a hammer. Upon his entry, he tied up the security staff member, took his keys, then went from room to room stabbing people. This lasted about an hour, and his actions left 19 men and women dead, and 26 others injured, 13 of them in critical condition. Satoshi posted this tweet celebrating his actions shortly after. By the time armed police arrived at the scene at around 3 in the morning, Satoshi was long gone, but he turned himself in within 2 hours of the attack. He walked into a police station, admitting to the crimes, carrying a bag full of knives and other sharp-edged tools, some of which were blood-stained. He said to the police, "I did it. The disabled should all disappear." Outside the police station was his parked car with the steering wheel covered in blood and plastic ties scattered on the back seat. What makes this situation more disturbing is that Satoshi had already told officials in advance that he would commit a similar attack. In February 2016, he had written a letter to Tadamori Oshima, a high-ranking Japanese government official. Satoshi attempted to deliver it directly to Tadamori at his home in Tokyo. He was stopped at Tadamori's front gate, so he left the letter with the security instead. In this letter, Satoshi argued that the government should permit euthanasia for disabled people, saying he would be willing to carry out such killings himself, detailing how he would do it. "I envision a world where a person with multiple disabilities can be euthanized, with an agreement from the guardians when it is difficult for the person to carry out household and social activities." Satoshi also wrote that the killing of disabled people would be for the sake of Japan and world peace, as well as to benefit the global economy and prevent World War III. He said he would target 2 facilities for disabled people during the night shift when there are less staff around. "The act will be carried out speedily and definitely without harming the staff. After wiping out the 260 people in 2 facilities, I will turn myself in." He wrote this same letter to the parliament in Japan. Because Satoshi had signed the letter with his full name, address, and employer's name, he was easily found and arrested, detained, questioned, and then involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital for 2 weeks. However, he was released on March the 2nd after doctors deemed that he was not a threat, leaving him free to commit the attack a few months later in July. The site was surrounded by relatives, media, and medical staff soon after the attack, and Satoshi's neighbors were also interviewed. Satoshi lived in a large house surrounded by weeds outside and piled with trash inside. His neighbors claimed that he had never displayed strange behavior, and he was just a regular young man and kind neighbor. After turning himself in, Satoshi said he was saving from unhappiness both the severely disabled and those who he believed were burdened with maintaining their lives. On February the 24th, 2019, Satoshi was charged with 19 counts of murder, 24 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of illegal confinement causing injury, 3 counts of illegal confinement, 1 count of unlawful entry, and 1 count of violating the firearm control law. He pleaded not guilty and showed no remorse for the attack, going on to say he did it for the sake of society. Satoshi was sentenced to death on March the 16th, 2020. This incident was said to be the worst mass violence incident in Japan since 1938, when a man went on a spree, armed with an axe, sword, and rifle, claiming 30 lives. Japan attracts many foreign English teachers each year, drawn by the opportunity to experience a unique culture while sharing their language skills. From bustling Tokyo to quiet rural towns, these educators find themselves immersed in a society that often differs greatly from their own. While most have positive experiences, occasionally, unsettling incidents occur that remind visitors that no country is without its darker side. One such teacher was 22-year-old Lindsay Hawker, who had ambitions of a master's degree back in England. But after graduating from university in 2006, she went to Japan for a year to teach English in Nova School in Tokyo. Lindsay was a fan of different cultures, namely Japanese, and had always wanted to experience it. She spent a few months being able to live out her new life in Japan in relative peace, until April 2007, when she would visit a student's apartment and never be seen again. Despite living so far away from home, Lindsay remained in daily contact with her boyfriend, family, and friends back in England. So when they couldn't get in contact with her on the 24th of March, they were worried. It was her roommates in Japan who first noticed her absence, which they immediately reported to the police. But this wouldn't amount to anything. The report did not make it to the relevant department and was basically ignored. A few days later, however, because she had missed 2 days of classes, her employer, Nova School, called her father in England to report her absence. He then called the police, who would finally begin a search. The police retraced her steps. Her last entry on Facebook was a message to her boyfriend that read, "Love you lots. Don't worry about the guy who chased me home. It's just crazy Japan. Miss you." After a discussion with Lindsay's roommates, police learned that Lindsay had recently met a man on the train. This man was supposedly desperate to learn English and had approached Lindsay for help, claiming he is a student of hers. When she corrected him and told him he wasn't, he chased her home and asked her if she would give him a private English lesson. He then drew a picture of her and gave it to her to build some trust with her. Since it wasn't unusual for Lindsay to give private English lessons, she agreed to it. A note from Lindsay revealed that they agreed to meet at a cafe near his apartment at 9 a.m. on the 25th of March. Police were able to obtain CCTV footage from the cafe to confirm this. This is the image that would help confirm the person who is considered the primary suspect, Lindsay Hawker ordering a coffee with Tatsuya Ichihashi. This image was the last known image of Lindsay alive. Staff from the shop said that there seemed nothing unusual about the pair, and their appearance was consistent with the teacher giving a private English lesson. After ordering this coffee, Tatsuya told Lindsay he had forgotten the money for her fee in his apartment and they'd need to go back there so he could pay her for the lesson. Tatsuya was a 28-year-old native of Tokyo from a well-off family who was unemployed and living on a monthly allowance in an apartment owned by his parents. He was a fitness-obsessed university graduate and had no previous convictions, but had once been accused of assaulting a man and stealing from him. More CCTV footage outside of Tatsuya's apartment showed a taxi pulling up and Lindsay and Tatsuya getting out. The taxi waited a few minutes before driving off. When the police spoke to the driver, he told him that Lindsay asked him to wait for her, but he left when she did not return. It was clear by this information that Lindsay's intentions were to return after a few minutes, otherwise, she would not have asked the taxi to wait for her. When the police arrived at Tatsuya's apartment, they noticed that the lights were on and other signs that someone was home, but they did not have enough probable cause to knock on his door, so had to wait for him to step out. When he did eventually step out with a bag full of dirty laundry, he managed to escape the scene and the police. The inside of Tatsuya's apartment was a grim scene. Lindsay's body was found with her hands and feet bound in a bath full of sand and compost soil on the balcony. Her naked body was bound and gagged with plastic ties and scarves. There were bruises and injuries all over her. Lindsay's head had been shaved, and her hair was found in a bag in the apartment. A violent struggle had taken place. Both Tatsuya and Lindsay were black belt in martial arts. Lindsay had clearly fought back as hard as she could, but Tatsuya was much more experienced and also stronger. The scene inside helped establish the motive of the crime. Adult Japanese comics were strewn across the floor with Lindsay's possessions. These comics depicted dark fetishes with women being tortured before they were SA'd and then strangled, the same things Lindsay faced before her life was taken. The Japanese media published Lindsay's CCTV footage, appealing to the public for any information on Tatsuya's whereabouts. Police offered a 10 million yen reward, but it took more than 2 years to find him, and for a disturbing reason. During that time, the police investigation revealed that he had gone 6 different times to the same hardware store to purchase materials to dispose of Lindsay's body. They also discovered he had a girlfriend he had been seeing for more than a year, but she did not have a clue where he was. Over the 2 years, Lindsay's family, along with British police, visited Japan multiple times to visit the scene and appeal to the public for more information. Some reports stated that Tatsuya had taken his own life, whilst others said he had fled to the Philippines, but none of that was true. Tatsuya had been living under false names in Osaka, over 300 miles away from Tokyo, staying away from CCTV cameras and any electronic trails. It was in November 2009 that Tatsuya was arrested whilst attempting to board a ferry to the southern island of Okinawa. He had spent the previous 13 months working on a local construction site. Colleagues said he was a loner who would always refuse to be photographed. A police search of his room in a company dormitory revealed a number of mirrors, an English dictionary, and a partly completed application form for a passport with a false name. The reason why finding Tatsuya took so long is because he had significantly modified his appearance to avoid detection. He bound up his nose with a needle and thread to make it narrower. He tried to cut off part of his lower lip using scissors to make it thinner. This process was excruciatingly painful. He had to wait a few days after the first attempt before doing it a second time to achieve his desired look. When he later saw a wanted poster with his face on it, he cut off the molds on his left cheek using a box cutter. He also had a nose job to make his nose even narrower and longer, which required 2 appointments, but this would be the reason for his downfall. The appointments involved taking detailed photos of Tatsuya's face, and the employees there noticed his similarity to the photos published in the media appeal, which were then sent to the police. When the media decided to run the story with his updated appearance, it tipped Tatsuya off. When he was found trying to board the ferry to Okinawa, he was disguised in fake sideburns, glasses, and a beard. In court, Tatsuya admitted to suffocating Lindsay to prevent her from screaming for help while he forced himself on her, but claimed he did not intend to kill her. Even though Lindsay's family believed a death penalty was in order, due to Tatsuya's relatively young age and lack of previous conviction, he received a life sentence for the murder of Lindsay Hawker. Law enforcement agencies around the world are entrusted with the important task of solving crimes and making sure we all stay safe. While many officers and detectives work hard to uphold justice, no system is perfect. Occasionally, cases are hindered by departmental oversights, procedural errors, or, to put it bluntly, dishonesty. What do you do when you are being stalked by a dangerous individual and the police won't lift a finger to help you? One such case took place in Okinawa, Japan, on October 1999, when a 21-year-old Japanese student, Shioro Ino, was found stabbed on her way to college. Under normal circumstances, the police would get on an investigation right away to find the perpetrator. But in this case, they began a series of campaigns to vilify Shiori in order to cover up the fact that they could have prevented her death. Shiori was a hard-working student who attended university near her hometown, Okinawa, just 30 miles north of Tokyo. She had recently started dating a man named Makoto around January 1999. Makoto was a 23-year-old businessman who found success in dealing cars, real estate, and precious metals. Except, none of that was true. Makoto had given Shiori a false name and lied about his age and profession. This man called Makoto was actually Kazuhito Komatsu, a 26-year-old man who ran a series of illegal brothels with his brother, Takeshi, who was a firefighter. Over their next few dates, Kazuhito began to shower Shiori with expensive handbags and designer clothes, but Shiori was not really comfortable with accepting such expensive gifts. But if she ever refused his gifts, he would scream abuse at her in public, so she was forced to accept them. As Shiori began to feel more and more uncomfortable with Kazuhito's presence, she attempted to break off contact with him, but he persisted in calling her, and if she didn't respond, he would call the phones of her parents. When she found Kazuhito's real identity on a credit card in his car, he threatened to physically hurt her. Almost 3 months after their first encounter, in March 1999, Shiori told a friend that she was scared for her life, and what's especially notable at this point is that she even wrote a will. She attempted to break off contact with Kazuhito for a second time, but this time, Kazuhito threatened her family with violence, specifically her younger brother, who was just a child in elementary school. This would keep her tied in the relationship for months, until June that year when Shiori arranged to meet Kazuhito and managed to break it off, telling him that she couldn't endure him anymore. This was followed by Kazuhito, his brother, and another man showing up to Shiori's family home to threaten the entire family with false accusations of embezzlement. Shiori's father offered the expensive gifts back and told them to leave. The men refused the gifts and soon left. Shiori managed to record this encounter on audio, but when they went to the police the next day, they were told the police couldn't get involved in domestic issues. After this, Shiori started receiving 20 to 30 calls a day from a man she didn't know called Tanaka. In some calls, Tanaka would just breathe heavily and then hang up, and sometimes he'd demand the gifts back, followed by threats. She went to the police a second time, later in June 1999, but this time, the police told her she was at fault for accepting the gifts in the first place and sent her away. Shiori and her family left the police station confused and unsure of what to do. Sadly, Shiori's torture wouldn't end there. Kazuhito was still convinced that Shiori wanted to be with him and tried multiple times to call and meet her in person so they could get back together. Shiori refused all of his advances and even returned all the gifts he had given her. This action infuriated Kazuhito because he must have realized that Shiori wanted nothing to do with him, and he started a mass campaign of slander against her by sending letters to all her neighbors, her college, and even about 800 to her father's workplace, defaming her. It isn't clear what these letters contained, but they were libelous enough for Shiori and her parents to consider filing charges. When they did approach the police with the letters, the police said things like, "They're using good paper. Maybe you should wait until after your daughter's exams are over," and were basically laughed out of the station. The police had no intention of acting on the charges made. In fact, in September that year, they visited Shiori's home and asked them to drop the charges. The reason why is because unsolved charges would reflect poorly on their station, so instead of actually doing the investigation, the police marked the investigation as resolved. Kazuhito and his associates would continue this harassment in the form of slanderous letters, threats, and stalking. Then, at midday on October the 26th, 2009, when Shiori was on her way to class, she was stabbed in the side and in her heart at Okigawa Station. Even though it was relatively crowded, her attackers were able to flee the scene. She was taken to a nearby hospital but succumbed to her injuries. The worst fear had been realized for Shiori's family. After months of inaction, she was dead. But the police were still not ready to give the family justice. Instead, they started a misinformation campaign about her being a promiscuous woman who slept around and enjoyed men purchasing luxury goods for her. Mainstream press and local tabloids jumped on this same bandwagon to slander Shiori. A few weeks later, a journalist named Kiyoshi Shimutsu published a detailed article in a magazine named Focus, which outlined the events, including Kazuhito's character, harassment, and violence towards Shiori. Due to public outcry, this article finally pushed the police to take action against Kazuhito. A search for Shiori's killers and anyone else who was involved in the harassment began and intensified in the region. It was reported by witnesses that multiple people seemed to be involved in the attack. Eventually, multiple people were apprehended. It wasn't Kazuhito that had carried out the attack, but rather Yoshifumi Kubuta, along with his two accomplices, Akira Kawakami and Yoshitaka Ito. Kazuhito had an alibi. He was not in Okigawa, but in the deep south of Japan, in Okinawa. Before he left, he had approached an ex-manager of one of his brothels, Yoshifumi, and offered him 20 million yen to take Shiori's life. Yoshifumi then recruited the two accomplices under his wing, and the plan was organized by Kazuhito's brother, Takeshi. In December 1999, these people and 8 others involved with harassing Shiori were arrested. Kazuhito Komatsu's body was found in a lake in Teshikaga. Notes in a bag floating with him suggested he had taken his own life after arranging Shiori's murder. Takeshi Komatsu was recognized as the mastermind behind the murder of Shiori and was sentenced to life in prison for his role. The actual murderer, Yoshifumi, who had killed Shiori with 2 stab wounds, received a sentence of 18 years. The 2 accomplices were each sentenced to 15 years. There was also criticism of the police in the media, and 3 senior police officers were charged with falsifying official documents. An investigation revealed that they stated wrong facts in a document regarding Shiori's initial complaint, in order to not have to deal with her. All of them received varying prison sentences of a couple of months. After a lawsuit, Shiori's family received about $35,000 in compensation for the botched police investigation, 5% of their requested amount. Thank you for listening.